Monica, and I am the co-owner of Eugene Dog Services and Central Bark, which is a new doggy daycare that's opening here in Eugene. And I've been working with dogs for 7 years, just in the shelter space and the Humane Society space, and talking to dog trainers and things like that, just because the topic of overall dog behavior and training interests me very, very greatly.
Excellent. So I'm Lauren. I own Creative Canine Solutions. I am a certified professional dog trainer, a Karen Pryor Academy training partner, and a fear-free dog trainer. And I have been professionally training dogs for about 4 years now, and have been working with dogs at vet clinics and at the shelter for about 6 or 7 years. So Monica and I were having beers and decided that this was the next thing we needed to talk about after we talked about it for like an hour over beers. So we're both very passionate, very excited. This is our third webinar together too, which is really exciting. So hooray. All right, cool.
Thank you for anyone who is a returning viewer. We appreciate your ears.
Yes, and to our new viewers, welcome. This is a really heavy topic, but we're going to make it as fun as possible. There are at least 2 memes in the presentation, which is a low volume of memes for me, but it did feel somewhat serious. So, all right.
It's definitely a controversial topic. What we are presenting today, we try to gather as much information from not only scientists, but certified professionals to kind of bring you this information, just because, again, there are kind of 2 different theories of thought when it comes to training. So just keep in mind, we don't mean to upset anyone if you've been using these training methods or have heard that these were okay. At the end of the day, we really encourage everyone to do your own research, kind of read different blogs and different books in order to really, conclude what you need at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would tag on to that too, what Monica was saying, which is like, if you've used these methods, there is no judgment. You will hear several stories throughout the webinar where we have used these methods before we became professionals, because it was common sense back in the day, right? This is just, you did what trainers told you, and these are the things that trainers told you to do because the information that they had at the time indicated that these were the correct decisions. So don't feel bad. This is a judgment-free zone. We're just here to talk about new ways of thinking about dog behavior now that we know what we know. But we are not judging you at all. I will talk later about the time that my dad had me bite my dog's ear as a kid. So don't worry about it. We've all been there. It's cool. We're not here to judge you.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. Screen share time.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm going to do this. Desktop share. All right. Can you guys see my screen? Did my mission accomplish? Yes, we can. Excellent. Yes. Okay. Now, the only hard thing is I can't see. There we go, participants. I just want to make sure I can see if anyone pops into the weight room. And then will you keep an eye on the chat, Monica?
Yes, I will.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm assuming you guys can't see any of my Zoom stuff. So far, so good. Okay, cool. All right, let's get this party started. I'm going to stop my video so you guys can just see the slides. All right, Monica, does that look right?
Yes, it does. You look good.
Yeehaw. All right, so first things first. Where does dominance theory come from? So this theory has been around since the 30s and 40s. Animal behaviorist at the time named Rudolf Schenkel was doing studies of captive wolves and watching their interpersonal dynamics, what they were doing, how they behaved with each other. And what he saw was a lot of fighting between the dogs. Sorry, I got a private message. Kathy, you are good. No microphone necessary. Don't even worry about it. So what he discovered was that these wolves were often fighting with each other. And what he determined was there is an alpha male in the pack, and the other wolves are consistently vying to become alpha. And the strongest wolf maintained that status by constantly putting them down. So that theory was then applied to dogs and popularized in the 70s with the monks of New Skeet, which if you've never heard of them, they're an old school dog training group. This is where this book, How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, is where my dad got the idea that my brother and I should bite our young dog on the ear so that our dog knew his place in the pack, which was below us. And my dog and I did it. And my dog and I both looked at each other like, what just happened and why? So this has been something that has been popular in dog training theory for, I mean, almost 100 years at this point, right? Because it's 2020. And it really hasn't changed since the initial theory in the 30s and 40s. And it's really interesting because you can look back at dog training books from the time and see where this started. Not that I think you should read those books with any seriousness, but they are really interesting in that sense. And Monika, do you want to talk a little bit more about the monks of New Skeet?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up some of the interesting methods that they use or recommendations they told in their books as far as how you should discipline your dog, because they were very into physical and mental intimidation. So they would recommend things like hitting your dog hard enough under the chin so that it hurts, and shaking the dog by the scruff of their neck while you're yelling at them. They call the alpha wolf rollover as an ultimate punishment for the most severe disobedience, which, Lauren, if I'm not mistaken, is basically rolling your dog over and standing over him, pretending as if you're quote unquote the alpha. Is that correct?
Yep, pinning them down and staring them into the eyes until they break eye contact.
Which, with anyone who is familiar with how to properly greet a dog, you know that those are very intimidating things for dogs, and things like staring them in the eye is something you should absolutely avoid doing. So just interesting that they would recommend such, I would say, severe and harsh disciplinary techniques in order to get what they think, in order to get the behavior that you wanted to see from a dog.
And interestingly, high risk choices, because if a wolf does do this to another wolf, and the wolf that you are trying to like pin to the ground decides to bite you, you have teeth to bite back with. If you do this to a dog and a dog decides, no way is this going to happen, what's your game plan? So this is really, really dangerous. If you watch a lot of Cesar Millan, he will do this to dogs, and you will notice that every time at the beginning of his episodes, it says, don't try this at home. And you'll see as we go, like the whole idea of dog training now is that you should be able to do these things at home, and you should never be in a situation where your dog feels like they need to bite you in order to protect themselves. So yeah, that kind of training is really intense. And I think it's a miracle that dogs didn't bite us more often than they did, honestly.
Absolutely. And before we go on, something that Lauren mentioned, I really want you guys to keep in mind until we kind of go over this in the next few slides, is that the wolves that were living, or the wolves that were being studied in the 1930s and 40s, were wolves that were living in a fenced-in enclosure with far less resources than what they would have in the wild. So keep that in mind as we keep going forward.
Yeah, and remember too that wolves are meant to roam for miles and miles and miles every day, which is difficult to do in an enclosed space, right? Okay, so given that the study was done on wolves, how do we get to the point where we're like, if it works for wolves, surely it will work for human and dog relationships? And the logic is basically dogs descended from wolves. Wolves clearly live in alpha hierarchies. Therefore, humans need to be alpha to their pets in order for them to behave, because wolf packs are clearly hanging on by a very thin thread of aggression at any given moment. And the first thing to think about with this is that it has been a really long time since dogs were wolves. So current running theory is that humans started domesticating dogs about 15,000 years ago. Just as a friendly reminder, we are 2020 years into Common Era. So 15,000 years is a very, 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 very long if common era started 2,000 years ago, and we don't even know a lot of what we know about that time period, right? So 15,000 years is a long time. The other thing is that dogs didn't descend from wolves. Dogs shared, what they call proto-dogs, shared an ancestor with wolves. So if you look at the tree here, you can see wolves and dogs are the last bracket at the bottom. They shared a common ancestor and then diverged about 20 to 40,000 years ago. And I'm going to keep going back to, we are 2,000 years into current common era. So 20 to 40,000 years is a length of time that I cannot grasp. Right? I don't even remember what I had for breakfast last week.
Totally.
And we're talking about something that happened almost 30 to 40,000 years ago. So it's been a really long time since dogs and wolves were a common ancestor, and a really, really, really long time since they diverged away from each other. So dogs are not wolves is basically the important sum of this slide, right? Any more than humans are apes, right? Are part of the great apes. Yes, we're related to them, and we're super different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other thing to think about with this is that wild wolves actually don't have an alpha and hierarchical pack. So L. David Meck is a biologist who specializes in wolf behavior. I think the way that he puts it is he has been studying wolves for 25 summers, because it's really difficult and dangerous to study wolves in the winter in northern Canada because you will freeze to death. But so he's been, for 25 years, basically, he's been studying wolves in the wild in their natural habitat. And what he discovered was wild wolves live in familial packs, usually with an adult male and adult female who are the parents. And then the wolves underneath, if you will think of it that way, are their children. And when an adult wolf decides that they don't want to be living with their family anymore, they leave and go start a new pack. So there's no vying for hierarchy in wolves because they're familial, and generally their activities are done the same way that you might think about a well-run organization. The male and female who are the oldest generally help the others divide labor among themselves. And they all basically have jobs and go out and do those jobs that are better for the whole pack, and then they come back. So any fighting done during the research that this came from in the 30s was done on wolves who were not related to each other and were held in captivity. So non-natural pack dynamic, because they weren't the way a pack normally interacts. They weren't all related, and like Monika mentioned, they were stuck in a small enclosure. So it was completely non-natural behavior, which is why there was so much aggression noted. So not only are dogs not wolves, wolves actually don't behave the way that we think wolves behave as part of common sense, right? And I read enough like werewolf sci-fi and fantasy to know that people really, really, really love the alpha thing. But it's not true in wolves. They're familially related. There's no alpha and omega or anything like that. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Monika?
No, I do think, successful social groups do work because of voluntary deference and not when they're using aggressively enforced dominance. So, I mean, again, going back to body language and understanding, whether what a wolf is saying to another wolf or what dogs are saying to us humans or another dog, you really have to know what they're saying, because a lot of times the last resort is an aggressive display.
Yeah, if you think about wolves in the wild, right? Let's go back to this one. If you fight constantly as a wild animal, you will become injured. And if you are injured, your chances of survival are significantly lower. And evolution pretty much cares about one thing, and that one thing is that you live long enough to reproduce. And if you fight constantly, the chances that you live long enough to reproduce are really slim. So you as a species don't evolve very well if you are constantly infighting with each other and expending that energy instead of using it to find food or living accommodations, etc. Right? So there's no practical purpose to be constantly fighting with each other. Humans accepted because apparently that's our jam, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
find that even like the status, if someone has a household with more than one dog, do you find that even the status of one dog is fluid?
Yes, absolutely. It really depends on what the dogs are doing. So and you think about this, right? Anytime we have dogs who don't get along in a household, it's usually because they don't have a fluid relationship. It's not that one of them is trying to be dominant all the time. It's that there are these really specific things where they have a disagreement on the way that this is going to play out. Because most dogs will have a relationship where it's a give and a take. So I currently only have one dog. When I had two dogs, my corgi mix, who's 30 pounds, would walk up to my 60-pound pit bull while she was eating, and she would back away from her food bowl and sit down and let him take food. And she did this for his entire life. She, no matter how, even when he got to the point where he was in a little doggy wheelchair, she would always back off and let him eat. So if alpha theory is real, A, why didn't she confront him at the point where he became quote unquote weak and not a leader anymore, right? And B, like, she's twice his size. Why would she back off? Because she was like, this is our fluid relationship. Food is more important to you. I'm not going to argue with you about this part. But then if he had a toy and she came over, he would let her take the toy because for him, the toy was not nearly as important and wasn't worth arguing about. And so they had a give and a take in a fluid relationship. So how can we say one of them is dominant when they both display quote unquote dominant behaviors in different scenarios? Right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So how about when, let's say, a dog does use aggression to quote unquote get what they want, and it's if it's not displaying dominance, like what's happening there, Lauren?
Yeah, so that would be depending on what they're doing, it's generally resource guarding. And we're going to get into this in a little bit, but that's essentially what dominance actually is as far as ethologists are concerned. So, as far as people who study behavior are concerned, dominance is priority access to resources. So, that means that if I'm the dominant one, I get to decide I am eating this and you are not, or I am playing with this toy and you are not. So it's actually resource guarding. It's not deciding that I'm the boss and you must submit to me on all fronts. It's, I want this thing more than I think you want it, and I'm willing to fight you for it.
Absolutely. Kind of perfectly reminds me of the example you and I were talking about, which is, let's say, for example, Lauren and I are sitting at a table and there is a big plate of French fries and a plate of cheesecake. And I love cheesecake. And Lauren is kind of like, it's all right. And I am the same way about French fries, or I say, they're all right. But Lauren absolutely loves them. As you can imagine, I may be a little bit more competitive when it would come to me getting that cheesecake just because I simply want it more. And if Lauren was like slapping my hand and saying, those are my French fries, Monica, do not touch them, I would probably back off and be like, you know what? Not that hungry, don't like them all that much. You could have them, Lauren. So that's like a perfect example that we can kind of tie to human behavior when it comes to, what some people might perceive as aggression. When Lauren slapped my hand and said, I want it, it's more so just because she wants it way more than I do.
Right. If you saw that happening, would you look at us and be like, well, Lauren's clearly the alpha? Or would you be like, wow, first off, Lauren is really rude. And secondly, she clearly has a problem with French fries. Right? Like, it wouldn't make me the alpha. It would mean that we clearly should have ordered more French fries.
Yeah, exactly.
We love that example.
That having enough resources is key.
Yes, exactly. I love that example. Although if you add fruit to the cheesecake, it's gonna get ugly.
And I do kind of like French fries, but we'll still stick to that example just because food is great.
Well, and because we're well socialized adults, we would use our words instead of fisticuffs to get over this situation, right? But we'll get into well socialized dogs in a little bit too. So a couple things to think about, right? When we label a dog alpha, like if we watched me slapping Monica's hands away from the French fries and we said Lauren's an alpha in this situation, what good does that do us? So how does it help you adjust my behavior around French fries to know that I'm an alpha? Unless you're going to pin me to the ground and bite me on the ear every time I eat a French fry, which we'll get into a little bit why that theoretically will work and has nothing to do with alphas. So labeling a dog an alpha is circular reasoning. So we look at it and we say, okay, my dog runs out the door in front of me. Why does he do that? Because he's an alpha. Okay, so how do we know? Why is he an alpha? Well, because he runs out the door in front of me. Okay, so then why is he running out the door in front of you? Well, he's an alpha. So on and so on and so on. So it doesn't give us any reason why a dog might be doing this behavior that we can then address. So alpha is a catch-all for literally any behavior. I went ahead and Googled like my dog is an alpha just to see what would pop up. And there are several websites out there that say your dog believes they are the alpha if they go out the dog door in front of you, they pull on leash, they sleep in bed with you, they get on the couch, they eat before you eat, they beg food from you. It's literally at any point we can say every behavior is because your dog is an alpha, which again doesn't give us a way to address those specific behaviors. So if we look at it and we're like, okay, the dog runs out the door ahead of me. First off, is that a problem? Do you care? I only care in the sense that if I'm opening my front door, I don't want my dog bolting out the door. But she's not bolting out because she's an alpha. Why do I think she's bolting out? There's squirrels. The neighbor's dog is out. Being outside is super great and fun and awesome. Maybe I didn't teach her an alternative behavior. And if we look at it that way, I now have 4 different things that I can address. So I can say, okay, so it's because she likes to chase the squirrels. So I'm going to train her when you see a squirrel to come back to me. Or because the neighbor's dog is out, same thing. Or because the outside is really fun. So I'm going to teach her to wait at the door, and then I'm going to let her go outside to reinforce it. So if we know why a behavior is happening, we have ways to help guide the behavior towards what we want. Whereas if we say, my dog is an alpha, how is alpha rolling your dog at the door going to prevent them from dashing? They're not related, right? Or even if I force my dog behind me and make her wait with force, first off, do you think she's going to enjoy going outside anymore? Potentially not, because she knows I'm going to get weird at the door. And there are nicer ways to train a wait at a door without you needing to be the alpha. The other thing to think about is that being an alpha actually puts pressure on you. And I have this really long-winded theory about toxic masculinity and alpha and dominance theory, because it basically says if your dog behaves this way, you are not in control and are a bad person, and therefore you need to become an overt aggressive personality in order to fix your bad dog. That sucks. Doesn't that make you feel bad? Like when your dog misbehaves, it's because you're not the alpha, which means you have a moral failing. And I am here to tell you, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Your dog's behavior has nothing to do with your value as a human being. I'm just going to say it one more time for anyone who needs to hear this today. Your dog's behavior has nothing to do with your value as a human being. So don't worry about whether or not you're the alpha. It doesn't matter. Your dog's bad, quote unquote, bad behavior doesn't mean that you're a bad dog owner. It just means that we have stuff to work on. So don't feel pressured to have to be the alpha, because A, it's not productive for us, right? And B, it doesn't help you or your dog in any way. It just makes you feel guilty in a situation where we could use that energy to adjust behavior.
And Lauren, I really love that example that you gave about your dog staying sit at the door, because really what it comes down to is safety versus you thinking you have to be dominant over your dog for him to stay at the door. Like when I am training Jordy, my dog, to do certain things, it's for the safety of him, because like you said, I don't want him to dash out the front door, but it's not because I want to feel like he needs to listen to me every single time I give him a cue to do something. You know, like I think that is
Yeah.
just such a key difference in kind of the difference in one training style versus the other. One using reinforcing with praise or treats or whatever works for your dog to get them to do what quote unquote you want them to in a healthy, positive way versus yelling at them or pinning them down in order to scare them into having the behavior you want to see.
Right. And you had this great quote that we talked about the other day, which is that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that successful social relationships only work because of voluntary deference and because of a healthy relationship. And the whole point is to avoid conflict and confrontation, right? So we can be our dog's leader in a gentle way, teach them what matters for safety or for our happiness or for their happiness, without having to hurt them or scare them into behaving themselves because we need to prove that we're the alpha. Because that construct doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't tell us anything about behavior. It doesn't help us be better dog owners. And in fact, it makes us tyrants. I said it.
We're, I don't think any of us are doing like military style training because this is supposed to, a dog who's supposed to go in the military or something. So
yeah, and this is hard too, because I'm assuming most of the people who signed up for our webinar know us both or follow us and know that we're really big on positive reinforcement. And when I was a kid and my dad would have me do these dominant things, and again, I'm not blaming my dad, he was doing what he was told to do at the time. And when I did these things, it made me feel bad, like I was hurting my puppy and doing things that I didn't want to do to him. And I think my dog and I were both really sad about it. I also think my dad was a little sad about it. The other thing to think about is doing these behaviors, alpha rolling, punishing dogs in any way. There's actually research that says punishment is reinforcing to the person doing the punishing, not because we're twisted in the head and totally messed up sociopaths, but because it gives immediate results, because the dog stops because they're scared. And so it feels good because we got that control that we so desperately needed. And thus we're more likely to do these alpha things again, whether or not they actually help in the long run, because it gave us that sense of control in the moment. But you can get that sense of control for things that are important, like having your dog wait at the door, without having to scare them or scare yourself. So we'll talk more about that too. This is getting real serious real quick. Let's look at Homer. Do you want to talk about this one?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So the Association of Pet Dog Trainers, along with the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior, the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, so many different groups of professionals who work with animals have issued position statements warning against the use of dominance in training or with dealing with behavior issues, because they're ineffective, they harm your relationship with your dog, and the risk that you will get injured is much higher. And I love this quote that Monika found from Dr. Raymond Coppinger, that's dogs may well be closely related to wolves, but that does not mean that they behave like wolves. People are closely related to chimps, but that doesn't make us a subspecies of chimpanzees, nor does it mean we behave like chimps. So your dog is as close to wolves as you are to a chimpanzee.
Love that quote. And if you are interested in learning more about origins of dogs and dog behavior, or honestly any of these things that we're talking about today, I highly recommend getting books from Dr. Raymond Coppinger. He's just fantastic.
Yes, education is so fun. All right, so now we're gonna get away from the dominance theory is stressful and hard on everyone, and I don't want you to be that stressed. You don't want to be that stressed. Your dog doesn't want to be that stressed too. Okay, Lauren, so if it's not dominant, then what are all of these things, right? And feel free, as a reminder, everyone, even though you're not on mic or on video, pop into the chat if you have any questions along the way, anything you're thinking about that you want us to talk about, anything that we said where you're like, that doesn't make any sense, or that goes against everything that I know in my heart to be true. Let's talk. Please pop in the chat if you have anything. Yeah. Okay, so if dominance isn't a thing, then what are these other things? And as a reminder, I titled this slide just off random, but dominance is a thing in the sense that between members of the same species, it's priority access to resources. So we talked a little earlier about resource guarding, which is where dogs will protect their things from other animals or from other dogs. That is dominance in the sense that they're protecting their access to that resource. And we'll get into that in a little bit too. Okay, so if dominance isn't real, then what about submissive behavior, right? So we often hear, like when you take your dog to the dog park, oh, my dog is super submissive, or my dog is super dominant. So when we say my dog is super submissive, what are the actual behaviors that we're looking at? A lot of the time it's appeasement behavior. So appeasement is, I understand that you're upset and I really don't want you to be upset anymore. So I am going to use my body language to communicate to you that we are all good. We don't have any beef. Please don't hurt me. Oh my God. And we'll show you a slide in a minute of what appeasement looks like. Submissive behavior is also fear. This little dog at the bottom here, that's a submissive, what we might call a submissive behavior. So he is rolled over because he is afraid or nervous and is trying to make himself as unthreatening as possible. Stress and anxiety are also often seen as submissive behaviors because dogs who are afraid often do that little roll, which is really, again, just an attempt to say, please don't hurt me. I'm not a big deal. It's not a rollover that says, I realize you're in charge and you may now proceed to do whatever you want to me for the rest of my life. It's more of a negotiation tactic. Please don't hurt me. I am so small and cute. So then what are the things that we usually label dominance? Aggression. Reactivity, which I distinguish from aggression. Aggression would be actively, offensively seeking to hurt something. Reactivity is making a big show in order to prevent others from hurting you. So it's kind of the opposite of appeasement. It's like, don't come over here. You really don't want to test me because I'm a really big deal. And I promise that I'll hurt you. Versus aggression, which is like, do come over here because I would like to take this outside. Anxiety is also often seen as dominance. So depending on what the behavior is. So humping is often an anxious or over-aroused behavior that people view as dominance. But it's usually just inappropriate relief of stress or anxiety. Also lack of socialization, inappropriate play styles, and then lack of or incomplete training. So if you're like, my dog is the alpha because he's stubborn, probably either you didn't finish training the behavior, he's never learned that behavior, you're in a really distracting environment, whatever the case may be. So then the question is, do you have to do all of these things? And feel free, anyone, pop in the chat if you've heard other things you're supposed to do that aren't listed here, but these are the ones I could think of. So do I need to eat before my dog eats to prove I'm the alpha? Nope. Do you need to go out the door first? Good question. That depends on what you care about. I like to go out the door first sometimes so that I can make sure there's nothing outside that might hurt my dog. I absolutely have to get out of the car first, but that's not because I'm the alpha. It's because I don't want my dog to jump out and get hurt. Do you need to keep your dog off the furniture? If you care about your furniture and don't want your dog on it, sure. I beg my dog every night to get in bed with me and snuggle. Totally up to you. Do you need to alpha roll your dog? Nope. It's not going to help you in any situation in a way that we can't do using a different method. And again, alpha is an arbitrary determination. So you don't need to worry about being the alpha because it doesn't really mean anything. We don't have a clear definition of what that would look like for each behavior.
And I feel like if the dog was stressed enough, you're just asking to get bit in the face.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So do you need to alpha roll your dog? If you want cool scars, consider it. Don't quote me on that. Please don't anyone alpha roll your dog. Do you need to win at tug of war every time? Nope. Unless you have some kind of complex. I lose at tug of war every time because I have a 60-pound pit bull who is made of pure muscle and loves tug. And I, if you've met me, am a chubby girl who never ever does upper body workouts. So I lose tug all the time. I even lose it when my husband and I team up against our dog. So, you know. Do you need to bite your dog on the ear? Nope. It's not going to do anything for you, except like I said, when I did it as a kid, it just made my dog and I both feel very uncomfortable. I don't think at any point in his 10 glorious years of life did our giant Akita ever think, well, since she bit me on the ear, I better defer to her in all matters. And you don't need to eat out of your dog's bowl. Again, earlier, if you logged in early, you got to hear me chat about my friend who's a dog trainer who heard this advice that you should put potato chips in your dog's bowl and eat them while your dog watches. I think the only thing that's going to do is either A, confuse your dog because he's never seen you eat out of his bowl before, or make your dog want a potato chip. 50-50 on that. Monika, anything to add?
No, I think those are the most common ones that I have heard of. I think one other one maybe is like to always punish your dog when they steal or chew on things that belong to you.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Or like tie it around their neck to their collar.
Yeah, that does not seem. I mean, don't get me wrong. Definitely want to teach your dog to drop it when appropriate, when there's something in their mouth that should not be. But I don't know if I would necessarily go over and alpha roll my dog and try to rip it out of their mouth.
Again, unless you wanted some really cool scars.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or to scare your dog into not wanting to hang out with you anymore, because that also could work. Okay. Yeah. So speaking of reasons to not alpha roll and scare your dog, we're going to talk about what does appeasement look like. And I realize we're already at like the 40-minute mark. Sorry, guys. This might be a little longer than expected. So if you need to book out, we are recording this. I know, shocker. We are recording this if you need to take off, and we'll send a link out to everyone when we're done. Okay, so what does appeasement look like? So as far as I can tell, this is the OG Guilty Dog video, so the original one on the internet. And we're just going to watch it. We may not watch all of it. Okay, so we got a little bit of appeasement behavior even in this. So you can see Macy's trying to turn her head away. That's an appeasement behavior. It's like, hey man, I don't know why you're shoving this thing in my face. Oh, but it smells like cat food, so that's nice. We got a little lip lick and some whale eye at the end there. So also appeasement behaviors. Hey, I don't know why you're shoving this in my face. Please don't. Ooh, it smelled like cat food, but please stop shoving it in my face. And now we're going to go to Denver.
Oh, the classic eye squint.
Yep. So he's got those beautiful squinchy eyes. His tail is wagging low down. It looks like it's half tucked between his legs. His ears are back. His eyes are almost half closed. Yep, there's that averted gaze. Turn the volume down on this and see if that helps. So listen as the guy escalates, and he's not hurting him or anything, but he's raising his voice. He's getting sterner. He's getting closer and closer to Denver, which we know is confrontational for dogs. Ooh. So this is a submissive grin. He's like, please, 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 please stop. I am trying so hard to tell you that I'm sorry. Like
lip lick.
So lots of lip licking. Yep. Averted gaze, submissive grin continuing. Look how hunched over he is. Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know, Kathy. The sound's not coming through. You're not missing anything other than the guy slowly raising his voice.
So a lot of people would see this as, oh, haha, cute, guilty behavior, right? But really what that dog is saying to its owner in so many ways is, I am so uncomfortable. Please get out of my bubble space. I have a bubble space and you're totally intruding it right now.
And I'm going to guess based on this video, and this is just a wild guess. So Macy, the other golden retriever who didn't react as strongly, she looks older. So she probably doesn't get into things as much as she used to anymore, whereas Denver looks like a younger lab. So we don't know based on this video whether or not Macy or Denver got into the cat treats, but what we can guess is that Denver often gets this kind of treatment from his owner when something has gone wrong. And so he knows that his owner approaching indicates that the owner is upset, and he is offering all of these appeasement behaviors to say, please stop. None of this says that Denver knows that he quote unquote did something wrong, but what Denver does know is that his owner is unhappy and that Denver is trying really, really hard to communicate to his owner, please don't be mad at me. You're making me uncomfortable. I don't enjoy when your voice gets raised, and I don't want you to hurt me. We don't know whether or not his owner will hurt him or not, but all of these behaviors are communicating, please stop what you're doing. I feel very uncomfortable and I don't want this to escalate. So that's what appeasement looks like. And I'm sorry if I ruined guilty dog videos for you ever. And by sorry, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Because they're sad and mean to dogs. Although I am part of a dog group on Facebook that does like human shaming from the dog's perspective, and it's dogs posting things like they went to a drive-through and I didn't get a biscuit and everything is terrible. And I love the human shaming.
That sounds hilarious.
It's so cute. Okay, so let's talk about where dominance actually does come in. And this quote is from the Association of Pet Dog Trainers. This is from their statement on dominance. So dominance does come into play in a relationship between members of the same species when one individual wants to have first pick of available resources. However, as Monika and I have discussed, right, it's not achieved through force or coercion, but through one member of the relationship deferring to another peacefully. In many households, the status of one dog over another is often fluid. In other words, one dog may be the first to take his pick of the toys, but will defer to the other dog when it comes to resting places, just like I talked about with my Corgi mix and my pit bull. Dogs that use aggression to get what they want are generally not displaying dominance, but rather anxiety-based behaviors, which will only increase if they are faced with verbal or physical threats from their human owners. So if these aggressive behaviors like guarding spaces or other anxiety-based behaviors like urinating on the carpet, running away from the owner instead of coming when called, when those behaviors occur, if we punish them because the root cause of those behaviors is anxiety, we actually make the behavior worse because the anxiety becomes stronger. Bummer.
Yeah, or sometimes if they, don't submit or don't perhaps show any kind of emotion, there's a lack of emotion, that level of violence might really escalate because your dog is just kind of keeping it in until one day he's really gonna snap and it's not gonna be pretty.
Right. Or conversely, you teach your dog to do what is called shutting down. It's also referred to as learned helplessness, where you will get a quote unquote very well-behaved dog who is too afraid to offer any behavior that isn't directly cued to them. So you have essentially, if you're a big Game of Thrones fan, I'm trying to remember his name. So there's the scary guy, Bolton, and then he does something to the Greyjoy guy where he like turns into this sniveling, whining, submissive servant. If that is what you would like your dog to be, then learned helplessness is what you're going for. So learned helplessness is a dog that will just hang out and do literally nothing because they're too afraid to offer you behavior.
Yeah.
And it's really sad.
Super sad.
Super sad.
Like a dog just shuts down and is no longer a dog.
Yeah, they're just a robot. And if you were interested in that, there are a lot of really neat toys on the market these days that will not require you to have a real dog, which I know that's not what any of you are interested in because you're here and you want a real dog and you love your real dog. And that's the saddest part about all this dominant stuff is, right, is we've been doing it for decades to our dogs because we love them and this is what we were told to do. And we've been misguided this whole time. So again, as a reminder from the beginning, we're not shaming you if you've done these things or do these things currently. We've all been there. It's all just part of a learning experience. And the good news is there are other options.
Yeah, and I think also just to add real quick, just because someone who's been in the dog training field for, let's say, 20 years, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily using some of these force-based methods, because there's definitely a lot of what I call crossover trainers who maybe, and when they first started, because that is the resource that was available to them, and their mentor more likely than not did utilize these same kind of methods. They may have read a lot of research and gone to seminars to learn and understand that those outdated methods perhaps weren't the best, and they've crossed over and are using more positive reinforcement methods now. So just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, people can learn. And I would say when you are picking a dog trainer, again, it's an unregulated industry. Ideally, you look for certifications from reputable organizations. And the other thing you want to look for is continuing education, right? Like, I don't want to go to my doctor if the last time that my doctor learned anything about medicine was 30 years ago.
Right.
We've had a lot of progress on medicine, even just in the last 5 years. So I want to know that my doctor's getting continuing education and is learning all of these new things. Same with your dog trainer. You want a dog trainer who's getting that continuing education so that they have a deeper understanding of the current best practice. All right. So again, dominance is real in the sense that it's a relationship between members of the same species. So dog, not dog, human, when one wants first pick of available resources. And dominance between dogs can go wrong. This little picture of puppies resource guarding, really stressful. And although look at the great appeasement behavior from the little gold guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like head back, ears pinned, tail tucked, like, I'm sorry. Please don't be what you are being right now.
And that's perfect. Like dogs displaying that is, especially for puppies, so important for them to learn, like, oh, okay, that's not okay. Okay, won't do that again.
Yeah, right? Like, it's not, oh my God, I submit to you, oh, fearless leader. It is, I don't know why you're being this way. Please don't be this way. All right, awesome. So when you do get resource guarding like this, it's dominance gone wrong. Okay, this is the one other meme that's in here and I love it so much. And after I found it last night, you can imagine that my husband and I ran around with each other, approaching each other and going at each other when we wanted something. So
was your dog like, what?
Oh, our dog was like, I don't know. I mean, she's so used to us doing weird stuff. She's like, I don't know why you people are the way you are.
Okay, humans.
So strange. She's so tender. If we hug for too long, she tries to bring us a toy. Like, guys, break it up. Don't fight. It's like, honey, we're hugging. And she's like, nope, this isn't normal dog behavior. Something's wrong.
So cute.
So cute. She's a nugget. All right. So let's look at a couple different, like, quote unquote dominance behaviors then, and then think about, if it's not dominance, then what does this behavior mean? And it helps if you think about, in dog training, we call it WTF. What's the function of the behavior? So anytime your dog is doing something, we want to look at a couple different things. What occurs right before the behavior happens? What's the behavior itself? And what's the consequence of the behavior? So what does your dog get out of it? Because dogs and all animals who are capable of learning, which is like basically everything, including amoebas, all perform behavior because it gets them something they want or helps them avoid something they do not want. So in the case of mounting and humping, a lot of the time when we see this behavior, and it's not sexual, because it can be, obviously, but when we see it in a non-sexual context, it's generally a release of anxiety, fear, or frustration. So when you have young dogs, you often get the, like, why is my dog humping the pillow? Well, A, do we think your dog is dominating the pillow so that pillow knows its place in the pack? Or do we think that your dog is a bunch of excess energy that it needs to release somehow, usually from over arousal, being too excited, or from being really anxious? And if you've ever been an anxious person, like I have been, or if you've ever had a panic attack, you have a lot of excess energy that you need to put somewhere. A lot of people, when they panic, will like flick their fingers a lot. I tend to tap my leg when I get really anxious. That energy's got to go somewhere. And I know as a human that humping pillows is not a socially acceptable way to handle that. Michelle, I'll make sure Mark tries to make whale noises at you tomorrow at work so you can see what it looks like. Yeah, so a mounting and a humping is a way for dogs to relieve that excess tension and stress. Is it socially acceptable between dogs? Not really. You can see the Jack Russell that's getting humped by this Chihuahua looks very uncomfortable. Seeing those sweet appeasement behaviors, we've got whale eye, averted gaze, um, and they do it because they don't know how else to help themselves in that moment. So if you have a dog, like if you come to me and you say, I need to hire a dog trainer because my dog is humping a lot, we're going to look at what in that scenario causes the humping. Is it guests coming through the door and then your dog starts humping their leg? We're really excited about guests coming over, so we're going to work on being less excited and agitated when guests arrive. Dog humping other dogs at the dog park, time to back off the dog park and work on some socialization exercises to help your dog feel more comfortable. So we're looking at what's the root cause of the behavior, because if we look at this and we say the Chihuahua is dominant, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to go over there every time he humps another dog and pin him to the ground? We could. That will probably stop him from humping other dogs because it was really scary for him. But then where is that anxiety and excess energy going to go? It could go to fighting other dogs because that energy is still there. And now he needs another way to let it out. Or it could go to fighting you, running away from you, vanishing into the woods outside the dog park and never returning because you were mean. Who knows? All right, what about why is my dog pinning other dogs to the ground? So are we looking at this and we're like, okay, so this Rottweiler is dominant? We could look at it that way. What I see in this picture is that something's not right here. So this is what we would consider inappropriate social behavior between dogs. So your dog pinning another dog to the ground or your dog getting pinned by another dog to the ground, that's not normal, healthy social play. Same way where if you have a kid who's playing with another kids and then just hauls off and starts beating the bejesus out of them, is that kid dominant? No, but is something socially incorrect here? Absolutely. So we're going to look at things like this and say, okay, did your dog not get socialized when they were young? Or did they have stressful experiences during their socialization period that were outside of your control? And now they're afraid of other dogs and this is how they handle it. Just like some people, when I get really afraid of something and I get startled, I will absolutely wallop whatever it is. You can ask my younger brother who hid behind shower curtains when we were kids and jumped out at me. I walloped him because it scared me. And when I'm afraid, I get angry. Versus other people who, when they get afraid, they run. Same with dogs. So we can look at this and say, is that Rottweiler doesn't know how to handle his behavior around other dogs? And so this is how he handles it to prove that no one can hurt him to keep himself safe. Things like that. So if we see this behavior, I'm not going to say that Rottweiler is an alpha. I'm going to say that dog needs remedial socialization to learn how to behave correctly when he is uncomfortable. Yeah.
Totally.
Also, if you do see this happening, especially with that level of bared teeth, don't put your hands in the middle of that, just as a FYI. All right. Why doesn't my dog listen? They are being stubborn or dominant, or do they not know the behavior as well as we thought that they did? Are they super distracted by something else? Or in the case of this husky puppy, are they tired? I Googled stubborn dogs and this came up. And that looks to me like a very pooped husky puppy.
Yes.
So what's the function of this behavior? In the case of this picture, it's probably exhaustion. And I'm going to guess the consequence is either puppy gets to take a nap, puppy gets dragged home where puppy can take a nap, or puppy gets picked up. Either way, puppy's exhausted. And so the function is to rest. In the case of, let's say, for example, so my dog's really pretty darn good at coming in the backyard when she's called. And I called her a couple months ago and she didn't come. So did I immediately go, dang it, she's out alpha-ing me again? Or did I stop and look out the door and be like, that's odd. Why isn't she coming? And lo, a squirrel was in the tree. And so I think in that moment, literally my dog could not hear me, because if you think about, again, dogs are scavengers and hunters, right? And if you are hunting in the wild and you're paying attention to literally everything around you when you are hunting your prey, are you going to catch your prey? Probably not, because you need all of that focus and energy to go into the hunt. And even though I don't think my dog is hunting that squirrel because she's a domesticated dog and that's not in her behavioral repertoire as strongly as it is in a wild animal. I do think that part of her brain still turns off. She's like, holy crap, squirrel. And her whole brain is like, everything must now go into squirrel mode. And we must keep an eye on the squirrel at all costs. So when I call her, she's not being stubborn. Her whole brain is like squirrel, 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 squirrel. And I'm in the background like, come. And her brain's like squirrel, 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 squirrel. So in that case, I need to either proof her recall better against squirrels, or, which is what I ended up doing, which is grab a bag of treats, go out there, show her the treats, and be like, just come inside and let's not bother the squirrel anymore. Either option is fine, right? Why is your dog pulling on leash? Is it because they're being the alpha? Or is it because sniffing is fun? You are very slow. They get to go faster to where they want to go to do what they want to do. I was thinking about this last night. It's like when you take your kids to Disneyland and your kids are pulling really hard on your arm, are they dominating you or are they super pumped to be at Disneyland? So for most dogs, pulling on leash is because they're super pumped to be going where they're going and they're attached to the world's slowest species on 2 legs. And we just got to get places, man. We got to go sniff things, man.
Yeah, and plus, dogs are not used to being on a leash, or, even sometimes you may notice when you get a puppy or even an adult dog that you rescued, they're very skittish when you try to put a collar on them. It's just it's not natural for them. So it's sometimes kind of understandable that when you have even a harness on them and you're supposed to prevent them from pulling, what Lauren said, I mean, they're dogs. Their noses are strong. They smell the world and they want to go explore.
Yeah, that's what they're built to do. If you observe like semi-feral or feral dogs in countries where they free roam in packs, they're not attached to leashes. They're not coming when people call them. They're sniffing around and going where their nose and their body tells them to go because that's natural dog behavior. And here we show up and we put them on a 6-foot leash and we're like, figure it out. Leash locking is basically the most counterintuitive thing you can do to a dog. Is it necessary? Absolutely. Am I saying you should take your dog's leash off? Negative. But we do need to teach them when the leash is clipped to you, this is the correct way to behave because it's counterintuitive to what they're expecting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Why are my dogs fighting? Again, we got to look at antecedent behavior consequence. So what happens before, what happens during, and what happens after. And so we could look at this and we could say, okay, so the golden, like maybe lab or retriever mix, whatever he is there, is trying to dominate this little pit bull. Or we can say something has occurred here which has caused this disagreement. And it's hard to know based on a photo what that might be. We don't know if like maybe the yellow thing in the corner over here is a toy. It looks like it might be a tennis ball or something. And so is this priority access to resources? The golden dog is like, that's my tennis ball, back up. Is there a person nearby that the golden dog is protecting and is like, that's my person, back up? Who knows? Is this healthy, normal dog behavior? Potentially. If this little altercation ends the problem, then that can be fairly normal behavior. If this altercation happens continuously, unhealthy behavior, and we need to look at what the root problem is. So if you get dogs who are fighting in the household consistently, then we need to look at what the cause of the behavior is and address it because it tends to escalate over time. So if dogs are often stressed when they're around each other, they're more likely to fight in more and more situations. But this is probably not a dominance thing unless, again, they're protecting a resource. If your dogs are just fighting intermittently, it means something that has gone wrong. It may also be fighting intermittently over resources. I get a lot of, my dogs seemed fine and then they went through a doorway together. So priority access to space. If your dogs keep fighting and escalating the fighting, that's unhealthy, abnormal behavior because no one's deferring in a polite social situation, in which case we desperately need to address that issue because it's not normal, and labeling one of them dominant isn't going to fix you, or labeling both of them dominant isn't going to fix your problem in that case. Monika, anything you want to add to any of these? Does that make sense?
No, I think you nailed that one perfectly.
Sweet. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you added cute art to this because this is awesome. So all of this to say, the whole idea of being an alpha is that you are supposed to be your dog's like leader. And in the case of alpha, that looks a lot like your dog's tyrant. And you can be a good leader for your dog in the same way that if you're an employee, you would want a good boss, right? So you want to think of this as a healthy parental kid relationship or boss employee relationship. You want to be consistent. So if your dog understands what the expectation is and your behavior is predictable in those circumstances, that helps reduce stress. So if you decide my dog is not allowed on the furniture, which is totally fine, that's up to you. I allow my dog on everything except tables. But it's totally up to you. If you say, okay, so dog's not allowed on the couch, not a problem. You need to be consistent. So if your dog gets on the couch, you need to ask them to get off every time. And you also need to reinforce the right choice. So if I don't want my dog on the couch, where do I want my dog? I want my dog on the dog bed. Great. You ask your dog off the couch, then you guide them to their dog bed with treats, and you give them something in their dog bed. Why would you get on the couch when you know I'm going to ask you off when you can go to your dog bed and chew on this bully stick, right? So we want to be consistent with what our rules are. We want to reinforce the correct choice. So if your dog follows the rule, we want to say, yes, that was awesome. Here is a reason for you to keep following that rule. So you got on the dog bed on your own. Here is a Kong. Here's a bully stick. Here is a shower of treats. Here is a new toy. Here are some pets. Whatever it is that your dog finds delightful. Because remember, dogs do behavior either to get what they want or to avoid what they do not want. And in this case, we're saying, if you want XYZ and you get in your dog bed, then I will give it to you. So getting in your dog bed is totally awesome because you get the things you want. You also want to make it easy for your dog to make the right choices. So if you are not at home to supervise your dog and ensure that they are not on the couch, we want to make it easy for your dog to choose not to get on the couch. So does that mean we put them in another room? Sure. Could it be that we put them in their crate? Sure. Could it be that we block access to the couch via a system of baby gates? Sure. Whatever works. But we want to make it easy for your dog to make the right choice, which is to not get on the couch. Another example of this might be, I don't want my dog barking at the window when other dogs walk by. So what do I want instead? I want my dog to be quiet when dogs walk by. So if my dog starts barking, I'm going to close the shades every time. That's a predictable behavior. If my dog sees a dog and does not bark, I'm going to give her cookies, and I'm going to make it easy for her to make the right choice. If I don't have cookies and I'm not training, I'm just going to keep the blind shut because you can't make the wrong choice to bark at dogs if you can't see the dogs, right? So that means when the blind is up, I have treats ready. And if you see another dog, I'm going to reinforce you while you're quiet before you bark because I made it easy for you to make that right choice. And then when my dog does bark out the window, I'm going to stay calm and I'm going to communicate what I want from her. So I'm not going to run over and pin her to the ground and alpha roll her. Instead, I'm going to walk over, I'm going to calmly close the blinds, and then I'm going to cue her to do a different behavior. Get off the chair and go lay in your bed and let's have some treats to calm down. So I'm being a good leader by being consistent, reinforcing the behavior I like, making it easy for my dog to make the choice to do the behavior I want to see by managing her environment, and then staying calm and communicating clearly. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So that is, if the most important thing you can do is be consistent, reinforce good behavior, and manage your dog so they can't make the wrong choices. So if you have a dog who counter surfs, don't give them access to the kitchen when food's on the counter. Don't wait to punish them. Instead, prevent the wrong behavior. All right,
and
awesome.
Also make sure to, if you are, let's say telling your dog to get off the couch, make sure you say off every time and don't use another word a different time. So make sure, as far as consistency goes, that means the words that you're using too.
Yes, super, super good point. I see this a lot with recall cues. Like if your dog knows puppy come as the recall cue, and then you start yelling puppy come here, totally different cue, right? Because dogs don't speak English. They're listening for what the cue is. And if you're saying the cue differently than normal, no response. My dog
even
knows.
The pitch of your voice can mean the difference between what they find familiar or not familiar.
Yes, absolutely. Totally. If you usually do, Jordy, come. And then one day you're like, Jordy, come. That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah,
Also, if I
and
were Jordy, I would be like, no, thank you.
yeah, to the first one, right? Yeah, he'd definitely look at me and give me like a pouty lip and just like keep doing what he's doing.
Why are you being like this? Yeah, if I yelled it at my dog in that voice, she would do appeasement behaviors immediately and stay as far away from me as possible because that's polite. All right, we got a great message or question from Kathy. We want to control toys so that we can give them to our dog when she does something right, but at the same time, we want her to have access to the right things to chew on instead of chewing on shoes. What are your thoughts? This is a super, super good question, right? Because we do want a way to reinforce behavior with toys, but we also want our dog to have free access to toys in order to have the right choice readily available. So one of the things that I like to do is rotate through a cast of toys. So we might say, you know, we're going to leave 2 hard chews and 3 soft chews out for our dog. And then I'm going to hold back 2 other hard chews and 3 soft toys. And when I see my dog doing something great, I might give one of the more novel toys. So if, like, let's say, for example, my dog just got 3 presents because it was her birthday. So she now has a squeaky raccoon, a squeaky fox, and like a lamb toy. And so I might leave the squeaky fox and the squeaky raccoon out this week and keep the lamb toy back. And if I see her do something great, I'm going to run and get the lamb toy and be like, lamb toy is the coolest toy. And she's going to be like, holy crap, lamb toy. And we're going to play with lamb toy. And then the next week, I'm going to leave lamb toy out and I might pull up squeaky fox because novelty is really exciting. So my dog always has options for a litany of toys to choose from, and I rotate through them. So it's not like I'm withholding any of them. I'm just saying this week, this is the selection we have because that keeps it spicy and interesting, and it gives me a new, quote unquote, new and exciting toy to offer. Does that make sense, Kathy? Awesome. Yay. Yeah, rotating toys keeps them novel and exciting. Or, you know, when your dog gets older, you just do what I do, which is have 1,000 toys hidden in a box, and then we just dig to the bottom of the box because that's basically rotating. All right, James, next, I think, on the question says, seems to me an interesting case study in dog social dynamics might be places where domesticated dogs become wild and feral. Yeah, so my understanding, contrary to what people would expect due to wolf domiciliary dogs travel solo rather than in packs and have become trash divers. This is true.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yep, this is super true. So if you get a chance to see feral dogs, so dogs who have reverted to feral behavior but are domesticated species, this is generally what you see is they've become scavengers. So you don't see dogs hunting. They don't hunt in packs. They tend to roam the street in packs, and it seems like predominantly because that's the easiest way to find resources is because they're all finding the same resource together. But the packs change. So the dogs don't stay consistently with the same other group of dogs. They're just going wherever the snacks are. And then the packs are very fluid. They shift and change because it's just a group of dogs hanging out to get snacks. Yeah, I think if I were going to go back and get my master's degree, which I probably will not, but if I got the opportunity to do that, that would be what I would want to study because it's so interesting seeing feral dog behavior because they're still a domesticated species. Yeah. Anything
if
to
you
add,
are
Monica?
more, I mean, that is such a fantastic thing to point out. So thank you, James, because it's absolutely true. And it's actually discussed in the book, Dogs and You Understanding of Canine Origin, Behavior, and Evolution by Raymond Coppinger. So if you want to learn more about that and have a better understanding, I highly, highly recommend that book. It's so good. My mind was literally blown when I read that book because, like, kind of what James said, it kind of flipped so much that I knew upside down based on like everything that people have told me in the past. So it was just such a great, great read.
Yeah, and it is true that it subverts dominance theory because dominance theory is based on pack dynamics, and feral dogs don't travel in what we might consider a true pack.
Right.
So yeah, and if you are interested in seeing very fascinating dog behavior, if you go on YouTube and search feral dogs, There are videos that people have recorded generally in places like India where dogs are free roaming more consistently, like feral dogs. And you can watch these dogs interact with each other, and it's a fascinating experience. I'm so jealous,
That's
Angie.
so
She says that
cool.
her daughter Kate got to see interesting feral dog behavior in a small rural village. Yeah, it's fascinating. Awesome. Brody asked, are unsupervised rawhide toys too dangerous? Super good question. I don't leave my dog unsupervised with any toy unless it is a toy that is industrial strength. So like the black Kongs, I don't always supervise her with because the chance that she'll break off a bit to swallow is very low. But any toy where there's a chance that it will break into small enough pieces that your dog can swallow and choke, I wouldn't leave it with them unsupervised.
Yeah, rawhides are definitely dangerous, I think, to leave
Mm,
unsupervised. And also bully sticks, just because they can
yeah.
get down to a very small size and potentially cause a choking hazard. If you are looking for, I mean, what Lauren said, if you have a heavy chewer, it I wouldn't recommend leaving something unsupervised at all. But if it's like a medium to light chewer, bones are really great.
Yeah.
They can't, even with like a few hours of heavy chewing, I mean, it can't, like, there's little pieces that might come off, but it's not something they can chew down to a very small size in a few hours at least.
Yeah, we give those to our dogs only under direct supervision because she turns them into shivs over time.
Does she?
Yep.
Yeah. See, again,
She
it
would,
all
but it does,
depends on
it
the
takes
dog.
hours. Yep. Yeah. So knowing your dog, keeping an eye on them until you feel better about it. Kathy, love that you keep buying new toys for your new puppy. The novelty is so fun. Also, dog toys are stupid cute. Everything about it is precious and I love it. I am not paid by BarkBox to plug them consistently, but I always do because we hit BarkBox for our dog because it means novel toys every month. And she loves them. She also, speaking of priority access to resources, she destroys less of her toys now that she has more high value toys to play with. But also it becomes at some point like fiscally insane to keep providing toys to a destructo dog, and buying them through BarkBox is really cheap.
Definitely.
Yeah, raw beef marrow bones are awesome. Depending on the surface of your floor, probably more of an outside chew.
Yeah, that's
They're
why we've
gross.
converted Jordy's kennel into a space where he knows if I say kennel, he knows. Oh, I probably shouldn't say that. Oh, he's not around me. Okay, good.
He's like, what are you
Because it
doing?
would not have surprised me if he literally booked it to his kennel and then like looked out and be like, "Where's my bone, mom?"
Yeah, beef marrow bones are awesome. The raw ones, especially because they're good for their teeth too, because
Yes.
they mush and it keeps their teeth nice and clean. Super high value though. So if you do have a dog who is resource guarding their priority access to resources, make sure your other pets are not around on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, but those are great in a nasty sort of way.
The smoked ones are definitely a little cleaner for that reason. They
Because
don't get
everything
all
just kind of
mushy.
falls off. Yeah, that's definitely better. All right, I do want to wrap up just in the sense that it's now been an hour and 15 minutes, so I don't want people to feel pressured to stay like they're going to miss anything. Please keep questions coming if you guys have any more. This is where you can find us. So I'm on the web at creativecaninesolutions.com and at Creative Canine Solutions on Facebook and Instagram. Monika has her own Rover page for dog walking, and I cannot recommend her enough because she uses positive reinforcement while dog walking and is great at walking reactive dogs, especially. All dogs in general, but it's nice to find a dog walker who can correctly handle dogs who are reactive. They are also building their very own doggy daycare at Central Bark, which is going to be off of West 11th, and I'm like insanely excited about it. So you can find them on Facebook and Instagram, both at Eugene Dog Services and at Central Bark Eugene, because it's going to be amazing. I'm really